So marketing across genre, I want to look today at the three different what we call macro genres. So this is inevitably going to be a high level view. Fiction, non-fiction, and poetry, they divide, each is a macro genre with loads and loads of individual genre in each. People forget that about poetry, actually. They think all poetry is the same, but it is absolutely isn't, and is subject to the same sort of genre divisions that fiction and non-fiction are indeed. And so, as I said, it's going to be a fairly high level view. Let me just. So what I'll be looking at today, broadly speaking, I begin just by looking at core indie marketing values in general, because I just want to do a quick refresh on that to make sure that we're all speaking from the same sort of understanding, and then talking about why genre really matters in promotion and marketing, and what, the reader journey. I'll also be discussing when we're looking at the overview of what, of everything, and then beginning to think about how the reader journey is different for the different genre. And I will then look specifically at some, again, broad high-level tactics for fiction, non-fiction, and poetry. And I'll then also look at people who do multi-genre like myself, who are, don't just write in one of the big genre. I, for my sins, for some reason, like to write fiction, non-fiction, and poetry. And then I mentioned some of the tools and resources that we have in ALLi that will help you to drill down further into this, and we make a bit of an action plan for you. However, I will also I'll be going into this in more depth again when we get a clearer idea. So one of the reasons that we came up with this webinar for you is that we were thinking about, would it be a useful thing for ALLi members to have genre spaces where they could meet, other writers who are writing in similar genre to them. And of course, we're putting together our big indie author bookstore where we're going to be highlighting your books and under the various genre divisions that are in your ALLi profile. So we're thinking a lot at the moment about genre and how that is important for you, and we really want to hear back from you as well about what you're looking for and what would be a good thing for you to have. So we'll talk a bit more about that at the end. So the reader journey. This is roughly the understanding. You can divide this up in all sorts of ways, and those of you who have been publishing for a while are going to be familiar with this concept, but it's always important to revisit this and to keep it front of mind. So the reader essentially starts off as a stranger to you. On some point, they encounter you on social media, in a bookstore, do a search for your kind of book, see one of your ads, another reader recommends them to you, but they've never heard of you. They are in the stranger zone. From stranger, they become a browser. Something about the recommendation interested them. They click through to your book page. They have a bit of a read. They check your reviews. That's your browser. And you're hoping that what they find there will lead them to become a reader, so that they will hopefully buy, perhaps borrow, and that's fine too. But in some way, they actually read the book. I think that's the thing that's most important to us. Not all buyers are readers, and particularly in the day of, very cheap books, free books, read all you can, plans and so on. Books that are bought are not always read. We want them to read it, and not only read it, we want them to become a fan. A fan leaves you a rating or a review. They'll join your list to know when your next book is out. They'll follow you on social media. And some of those fans will become super fans, buying your backlist, attending your events, and joining your subscription model, supporting you if you have a crowdfunder, and they go from hearing somebody else recommending you to becoming that recommender themselves. And then the final sort of beyond the superfan is the actual advocate who will join your street team or review crew, and who maybe has influence themselves and will host you on their podcast or wherever. So the important thing to say is that strangers are all the book readers in the world. Browsers, there are fewer of. Readers, fewer again. Fans, smaller. Super fans, smaller again. And advocates, smaller again. But those advocates, even though it's a far smaller group, they are gold, absolute gold, as are your fans and super fans. So that is what you are trying to cultivate as you bring the reader through the reader journey. And you do that by leaning, in marketing terms, by leaning very strongly into whatever it is you do and how you do it. And we don't have time for that general sort of marketing talk today, but that is how you do it, not by being bland and aiming for the middle, but by being very niche and aiming right into the core of your genre, or if you do more than one genre, each of them. And it's important also, as we think about genre, to think about what kind of publisher are you? What are your publishing values? What model of publishing are you most leaning towards? Because that is also, that kind of sits over genre. So are you a volume publisher? For volume publisher, the number one value is productivity, and their publishing priority is generally rapid release. And here's where we find the popular genre fiction writers, the most popular poets in the gift arena, the gift shop, rather than the literary end of the poetry, corner in the bookstore down in the basement or up on the 17th floor. The volume publisher is somebody who's looking to sell a lot. And the engagement publisher, the number one value there is connection. And the number one publishing priority for them is the relationship with the reader. So the engagement publisher will really listen to what readers are saying, and they will provide what the reader wants. They may even do editions, with special names in them if they're a children's writer, where the reader's name is in the book, or those kinds of things. They're active on social media or other forms of media. They really enjoy the connection with the reader, and it's very much a two-way thing. Whereas the volume publisher puts out the books, puts them out rapidly. Of course, it's also engaged with the reader, but we're talking about which of these you lean into most. The third one is the craft publisher, and here the number one value is originality. And the number one publishing priority here is artistry. So here's where you find the literary fiction people, the more literary poets, the narrative nonfiction people, because of course each of the three macro genre stretches across the full range, from the very literary values to popular values, and somewhere between the two. And I'm aware, as I'm using these terms, that they're all unsatisfactory. The great thing about writing is it's so diverse, so wild, so creative, that it's hard to categorize. And these are publisher categories rather than writing categories, but we do need to categorize in order to reach our readers and understand our genre and get kind of stuck into it. So core marketing indie principles in ALLi and beyond in the wider indie community, where you see successful writers, you see first of all a professional product. Editing, design, metadata, all the basics of the first four processes of publishing: editorial, book design, production and distribution. All of those need to be in place. Without those in place, there's no point in moving on to the fifth and sixth processes, which are marketing and promotion. So get all of that right first. You can be dipping your toe in the marketing waters by setting up an email and capture list and things like that while you are getting your products to standard, but there is not a lot of point in investing huge amounts of time into marketing or promotion until you've got that right. It's simply too competitive out there now, and you can't get away with it if indeed you ever could. I think at the very start of the indie revolution, because we were so tuned into our readers and creating new niches and things in a way that trade publishing wasn't. You could maybe get away with such things, but you certainly can't now. The other thing you do want to have in place is you want to try and have some kind of street team and review crew in place before you go out with your marketing. So you will need an ARC, an advanced review copy, or failing that, if the book is not ready yet and you're on your first book, try to get some other content and other writing out there whereby you are attracting people who are interested in what you do. But when you're starting off, it is you. But as soon as you can, think about other people and how you can bring them in. And we'll talk in a bit about other authors and how you go there. Also, remember, you'll be exhausted when the book is finished, but you need to create marketing content. You need samples, you need a good bio, you know, some exclusive bonus stuff. Get your marketing materials in place. By that, I don't mean physical print, you know, things to hand out to people, bookmarks and things like that. You can do those if you wish, and you do a lot of live events. I'm talking about things that will help the reader to understand what kind of book is this. Is it the genre I like to read? Is it the kind of book within that genre that I like to read? Everything that makes that clear, and you would need some kind of free sampling in order for them to enjoy it. So obviously on the retail platforms, they do the you know, read me and the short excerpts. You need the equivalent of that on your website or wherever, so you can share it with your email list. And we do it in this order, the following order: your personal platforms, your owned email platforms first, your email list, your own website, ideally your books for sale on your own website. Talk about that again. Then you move on to partnerships, collaborations, and author collectives. Really important to understand the other authors in your genre, and talk about that in a minute. And then when you've got your personals and your partners in place, only then do you start thinking about paid reach. And then finally, anything creative different out of the way. All good, but have these in place first. And the reason for that is, first of all, you know, capturing the readers yourself and having that all important email list is really key for your sustained success and making things easier for you as the next book comes along. Partnerships with authors and collaborations is a really low-hanging fruit for indie authors, particularly those like you who are in a network of people. It's really important to connect with authors and to understand what authors are doing in your own genre, and to reach out to them and, you know, speak to them. And you can do newsletter spots and all sorts of interesting things with other authors in place. You will learn so much from that process, and it's free. And then when you've learned everything and fed back in the learning, done the iteration, made the changes, then is the time to start doing ads. So too often we see, you know, brand new authors straight away thinking about ads, and you're not ready for ads until you've done some kind of connection and engagement with your reader base. And then, you know, once you've got those all set up, then you can do all sorts of wild, weird and wonderful things, and they can work really well because you have already got a group who are interested. So guess what? Why is that not moving? So there, the general overview. A lot of you very familiar to a lot of you already, but perhaps new to some of you, and all of those things are important. So if you've got all that in place, why is genre important? Why does it matter? Why are we, you know, why are we here? Why are we talking about this topic? Why is it advisable to really get serious about thinking about genre? So first of all, reader expectations and buying psychology differs across genre. The kind of person who buys a poetry book is not maybe the same person who buys a how-to self-help book, but not in the moment of buying. In the moment of buying, they're looking for something different. They're looking for a different kind of payoff, and your marketing needs to have the buzzwords that kind of presses that buying trigger in that particular genre. Also, with digital marketing now, you don't have a lot of choice in terms of breaking down, categorizing your book, putting it into the right genre, making sure your categories and keywords are ace and really relevant to the book that you're publishing, because all the algorithm marketing is based around categories and keywords, and that's especially important for the volume publisher, but very important for all of us now. Everything is algorithm driven, your own website, everything. So you need to think about it, genre from that point of view. Also, you know, the marketing hooks, those triggers I was talking about that say buy me, buy me. For fiction, they tend to be emotional, story driven. For nonfiction, not narrative nonfiction, the things that I'm talking about today, kind of, you're more in the fiction zone. Narrative nonfiction, by which I mean memoir and you know, creative nonfiction, I'm including that in the literary fiction end of fiction, and so take note of that. But most general nonfiction, all how-to nonfiction, is solution-based. And the marketing hook for a solution-based book is a completely different hook to a storybook. Sounds obvious, but sometimes in how we enact these things, even though it's obvious, we don't follow through in our marketing enactment. So keeping that kind of front of mind is really important. And then for poetry and for literary fiction, aesthetic connection is important, is kind of the most important thing. So finally, I think the reason that genre is really important is because your success metrics vary for each genre. So read through is really important for, say, the volume publisher of genre fiction, who will tend to have a series and want people to read from one to the next, and may not even begin to make money on their books until book number 3 of an 8-book series. But they're, you know, they based the whole thing on read through. And read through is not a factor whatsoever for somebody who's selling a standalone poetry book. Just doesn't exist. Poets may be depending on patronage or some other way of supplementing their career, because their business, because they're just not going to sell in the volume that is required to make that sort of impact. And for nonfiction, authority tends to be the measure of success. Once you begin to be perceived to be an authority in your nonfiction field is when you begin to see success. So that is another reason that genre matters. So I'm going to talk first of all about fiction. And fiction, unsurprisingly, uses story-driven marketing. And with fiction, when we're trying to, you know, create our marketing materials, when we're trying to write our book descriptions, when we're thinking about our book cover, it's all about emotion. And it's all about meeting the promises, the genre promises, in those marketing materials. And so the first thing we really have to do in all 3 genres is you need to go into what is your sub-genre within fiction. And so there is this large division in all the genre, the 2 sort of ends that I was talking about already, what you might call the popular end of the spectrum and the more literary end of the spectrum. Generally speaking, though not always, the more literary a book is, the fewer readers there are for it. But that's not always true, as we know, but generally speaking. So how we will approach the marketing will be different depending on which end of that fiction spectrum we find ourselves. And then, of course, within fiction, there are all the other genre, which will also fall across literary fiction, so science fiction, romance, whatever. It may fantasy, whatever it is. If you know your genre, and if you don't, that's your first job. You need to actually go to the lists of genre and see where do you fit in. As soon as you do that, next thing you need to do is you need to get to know the other authors, as I was saying, within your subgenre. And your subgenre will then break down into niches as well. So the more niche you can get, the better. And so that is a really important stage in an indie author's life, coming out of our own writing and realizing there are other authors who are writing in this. And don't tell me that there aren't, because there are. And if you think that there aren't, it's because you haven't found them yet and you need to dig deeper. So if we're on the genre fiction end of things, we're going to be looking at things like price, promotions, rapid release, linked series. As I was talking about earlier, the volume publisher model tends to proliferate, and or the reader relations model. So that's really important with genre fiction. With literary fiction, it's more on the influencer marketing side. And by influencer marketing, I mean literary influencers like journalists, reviewers, bookstores, literary events, and those kinds of things. Reputation is important. Prizes, awards. Reputation is important in literary fiction because the reader cares about not just the story, but also the words and how they're put together. And it's very highly competitive end of the publishing world, and so you need to work through other influencers who tell people that this book has those qualities. It's not something you can decide for yourself or tell the world yourself in quite the same way as you can when you're focusing on this is what the story is about and it's a series, and blah, blah, blah. It's a completely different way to approach it. So understanding the publishing models and values that I was talking about earlier, understanding your sub-niche, understanding your subgenre and your niche, and understanding what the other authors in your niche and subgenre are doing is really important. And one of the best ways to do that is obviously to look at their descriptions, but also to look at their reviews and to pick out the buzzwords, the energy words, the words that for you, there's crossover between what you're doing and what they are doing. And there are very good AI tools now that you can use where you can, drop in descriptions and blurbs and your own and other authors, and get the AI to tell you what's going on there and how to bring a reader along with you, how to actually, as I said, those buzzwords that press that buying trigger. So what works well for the genre fiction, in particular, we see it working very well, is live video now. It's BookTok is really shifting genre fiction in a big way, but live video generally, so shorts, really regular shorts, sometimes up to 6 or 8 little clips a day of what you are doing as a writer. It's as simple as that. You just, if you have the ability to do that, talk to camera and say, show them your notes, show them your warehouse if you have a warehouse full of books and everything in between. Essentially just sharing your day with your readers. And that is a relatively easy, if you can bear the staring into the green light bit, and readers love it and are lapping it up. Any kind of social storytelling about you as the author, what's going on in your life, but also, if you do issue-based fiction, people who, real life characters, stories, celebrity stories, you know, famous people stories from the media, or anything that kind of gets the reader interested in the character and the setting, and all of that is working really well. Trope marketing as well, where there are particular tropes in your genre and building your marketing around those. So the best social media, and I'm going to recommend for each of the three macro genre, I'm going to recommend what I'm calling the best social media, but in truth there is no such thing. Different writers are making a go of every single social platform out there, but I'm just speaking very generally what tends to be working well, you know, to work best. And for fiction, it's Meta, both Facebook and Instagram, but now it has to be ads. There was a time where you could get organic following enough to sell books, but that time is now past. So the best free option, if you're looking for free, is BookTok, and as I said, that means the beloved or dreaded live video, depending on how you feel about it. So that is fiction, broadly speaking. Nonfiction, then, story-based marketing can work well in nonfiction, and particularly, as I said, at the narrative end, because that's more like fiction than it is like solution-based general nonfiction. But in the solution-based end of things, what you're looking to do is to establish authority. You are a person. It used to be a time, you know, if you'd written a book on something, it made you an authority. Now far more people are writing books, and so there's more competition. And so you have to establish in your marketing that you are a significant authority in this how-to solution-based. And that's generally about identifying readers, what they call pain points. So classic marketing speak works best for nonfiction, and you know, this is the typical sort of in every field, and this is typically what you hear people talking about. What is the buyer's pain point? How do you solve it? And that is the case for solution-based nonfiction. SEO is really important here and on your website and everywhere else, so that if people who are looking to solve that particular problem key in key words, key search terms, your book comes up, you come up as an author. Content marketing is fantastic here, and all writers, as I said, need to have some samples and things that they give away, but content marketing can really drive your nonfiction in work in a way that I don't think it ever really drives fiction. So blog, podcast, guest posts, webinars, they don't have to be your own. You can be appearing on other people's, but you need to be getting out there and getting your content, you know, getting people signing up for a reader magnet or a solution or quiz or you know, something that you're offering them that gets them onto your mailing list. Video, again, becoming much more popular here, and you know, one very successful a nonfiction author just built their business by offering free videos but keeping them all private, so people had to either sign up or buy in order to access them. So really good keywords, really good titles, grabby kind of headlines, and it worked really well. Speaking engagements are typical for a non-fiction author, either online, this kind of webinar thing, or offline in an actual speaking real life, press the human flesh environment, and say it's in the back of the room. That has always traditionally been a great way to sell non-fiction books, and it still is, but it is exhausting compared to being online. So online marketing is kind of took over from the old mail order type of marketing. So a mix of both is what has been shown to work best, especially now in the age of AI, and especially if you're not willing to do live video, then it's really good to get out there. because it's all now about being human, showing that you are the real, authentic writer of this book, and people see you and know who you are, is core to good nonfiction marketing. And the best social media for nonfiction writers is LinkedIn, and for certain kinds of nonfiction, particularly anything with illustrations or graphs or pretty pages, nicely formatted books, Pinterest is really good for that. And finally, poetry, which a lot of people forget, and is one of the three macro genre, follows exactly the same sort of patterns for the other, the overall marketing advice. But with poetry, what you're trying to build more than anything else with your readers is a sense of intimacy. So poetry tends to be very heartfelt, obviously, and that's why people go for that particular genre. So live readings and virtual readings of your actual poetry is exposing and builds intimacy. And so that is what you are looking for. Audio works well with poetry if you can't bear the idea of video. Audio gives you that, the voice can carry that sense of intimacy, and I think there is not a reader alive who, poetry reader, who doesn't like to hear the actual poet read a poem that they have come to love. So voice is really important. Poets often are in the gift market. I think that is the most best place to begin your marketing of yourself as a poet. So unless, of course, your poetry just doesn't fall in there, but if you can even do some mixes of poems, maybe some lighter poems, some more accessible poetry, anything like that, gift books, and particularly if you're writing in the love poetry end of things, romance is always the biggest seller in fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. So, thinking gifts, thinking limited chapbooks, beautiful editions, anything for the gift market makes a lot of sense, and that can be the sort of gateway drug for those who like your poetry, who may then go on to read more. Also, what we see in marketing poetry much more than in the other two macro genre is cross arts collaborations. So working with musicians, working with visual artists, filmmakers. Film poetry has become a huge thing that didn't really exist 20 years ago, and is taking off more and more with the popularity of video. So yeah, cross arts promotion goes well, and people who like similar kinds of music, that highbrow, middlebrow distinction. People who like sort of middlebrow visual tend to like middlebrow poetry. So finding somebody who's in that arena, at the level roughly that you are. And the other thing for poetry that isn't really worth doing for the other two very much is getting publication in small magazines or awards. Again, you're looking for that influencer marketing with particularly serious poetry. So contests are worth doing, generally speaking, for poets to build a reputation and get known by people who can then, get you a decent venue for your reading, that kind of thing. The best social media for poets tends to be Instagram, surprisingly, perhaps, because it's such a visual platform, but there is that aesthetic kind of crossover there, and also in Pinterest. And if you can do the live video reading, then Book Talk definitely moves poetry books as well at the moment. I do want to take a moment just to talk about the multi-genre thing. I do fiction, Irish historical novels, inspirational poetry and nonfiction. So crossing all three, and it's not easy. So I just want to talk a little bit about, if you are somebody who's multi-passionate like me and likes to do that, first of all, you have to segment. So it's loads of work doing this, because everything you do, you have to do, in my case, 3 times over. There are different audiences. There may be some crossover, but at first you have to completely segment. And that means, you know, different autoresponders, different language, different tone, matching always the tone of your marketing to the tone of your books. They definitely always must align. That's really important. So content gets segmented. The only thing you can share is the processes. So you do all those things I spoke about at the beginning. You do street teams, you do have a review crew, you have launch templates. When you've done it for one, it's easier to do it. Again, you can do the same processes, and you will be familiar with the processes, and you will see how they work, and transfer them over. But content, the tones, the look, the feel, the emotional pull, the buzzwords, the triggers, they're all different for your different genre. So when you've done all that, and you've ruthlessly kind of segmented, and you've built a bit of an audience in each, then you can do a little bit of cross-pollination, but it needs to be gentle. There will be some people on one list who can also be interested in your other books, but by no means all. So you need to bear that in mind, and you also need to bear in mind keeping your list pure and devoted and engaged. If you start doing too much crossover, you can really confuse your readers, having gone to the trouble of segmenting them. So if you decide to cross-pollinate in any way, you know, do it with a link, an optional link. Don't do it with a hard sell. Not even a call to action, more just it's available, it's there, and if they're interested, they can pursue it. Always leading people back to your website, of course, which is a great way the best way to showcase everything that you do. And you can do a sort of a roundup blog or newsletter or podcast whereby you bring a bit of everything in, but you will be aware in doing that of what your major pull is, you know, who you're aiming for mainly, and then everything else is kind of like an add-on to that. And the other thing, if you are a multi-genre person, is to balance your production so that you're kind of pleasing everybody. And I certainly know how challenging that can become, but it's important. So yeah, going away from here now, if you haven't given thought, depending on what stage you're at and you know where you're at, and I'll get to know a bit more of that now in a few moments in the Q&A, but depending on where you are, do an audit of your current covers and descriptions, your metadata, your categories, and take a look at your own reviews and what readers are saying back to you, and you know, make sure that what you're putting out there matches the current genre expectations. So look, this is my 15th time to say it, but I can't say it often enough. Please do look at what's going on in your genre. Then create sort of a primary reader avatar in your mind for whichever genre you're aiming at. So you should have some kind of a sense of who is the ideal reader for me, who's my right reader, who do I want to kind of, who sits core and bullseye center in my genre that I want to be aiming at. Map quarterly calendar for what you're going to do. I'm a big believer in quarters as, you know, having a specific marketing task which you can test and try and see how it goes, giving yourself enough time to do these tasks. I think one of the reasons that we lose heart with marketing, and one of, you know, there are a number of core reasons, but one core reason is we don't allocate enough time. We're too anxious to get back to writing, as if marketing isn't writing. So it's really important to give it enough time. have a genre specifically magnet for each genre that you're dealing with, and have an separate autoresponder. So if you don't have all of that set up, then go off and do that. And then track whatever you're doing and test it and then get better at it. And when you're really good at it, then move on to something else. Don't try to do everything all at once. And yeah, we'd love to hear more about how it's going in your particular genre. So do please share your wins with us on the ALLi member milestones, because that helps us to share the good things that you're doing, but it also helps other authors in your genre to see what's working and what's happening now. And there are a number of tools and resources. I do want to speak about the marketing and promotion book, which are coming. My hiatus took me away. We have a new team member and community lead who's going to be focusing very much on providing these resources, and so this has caused a bit of a delay in the marketing and promotion book. So there is a revised publication date now of September of this year, and it will definitely come then, because it's no longer relying on one person. We have a few team members allocated to it. So if you're one of the people who volunteered to be on that review group, we will be sending an email to you about that in about a month's time. About 4 to 6 weeks time you should receive that from us. And apologies for the delay, and thank you for your patience on that. So as I said at the beginning, one of the things that we're kind of wondering about is whether forum genre groups would be interesting to you. Obviously, our members are all at different places. I mean, we have an author member category, and that can mean in some cases somebody who's just published their first book, and in other cases somebody who's on their 100th books, and everything in between. So we're never going to be able to match people exactly, but just wondering your feedback. You can drop an email to us if you want to, say more than is possible to say here in the chat that we'll have in a moment. info@allianceindependentauthors.org to member desk, and just in the subject line, if you just put genre groups and give us some feedback and tell us what you feel about that. But now I'd just like to open it up to questions. So if you have questions, please do pop them in. Kaylee very wisely, she's done this once or twice before, recommending that you put question in big letters so that I can pick it out of the other chats that you've probably been having. So Elizabeth wants to know, are there specific strategies for marketing literary fiction? So I hope I covered that, Elizabeth, a bit in the presentation. Yes is the short answer, and literary fiction has its own rules and its own set of expectations. So as I said, very much about influencer marketing, getting known outside of, obviously getting known within your author group, doing your newsletter swaps, all of those kinds of things are just exactly the same. So there's loads we can do as indies. That's no different. But in terms then of finding your core literary fiction readers, they generally tend to come through reviews and lean a little bit more print than lots of other genres. So hopefully you've got some specific strategies, but again, further question further down as we go through. I can take that. So Alison, I've written my first book, nonfiction, and I'm about to start marketing. Marvelous, and congratulations, first book. So it's so special. I don't plan to write any more. Is it worth me setting up a website just for one book? I would say it's always worth setting up a website, because you own that website. It's even if you don't intend to write any more, I'm presuming if you've written a nonfiction book, you want to help people in some way, and so you want to be in touch with people who read your book and make it easy for them to contact you. That's one reason. You can put the book on your actual website and sell it directly and make more money than you will on the retailers and other places. That's another reason. So also though, when people Google your name. When your book comes out first, it will show in book retailers if you're current and you're keeping books repeatedly with a retailer. If you just do one book and that's it, it will gradually fall down, and so it can be quite difficult for people to find you. Whereas if you have, I don't know if your writing name is Alison Marshall, but if you have AlisonMarshall.com, you'll always be found, and it should be always the number one thing that comes up around your name. So I would say it's always worth having a website. It doesn't have to be an expensive one, though. There are lots of ways now to do a website that are cheap and cheerful. So have a look at that. Okay, Judith, what is the best way to market a personal memoir? Evacuation from wildfire. Oh gosh, I'm so glad you did manage to evacuate. That's super traumatic. So yeah, personal memoir is marketed quite like narrative fiction. So yeah, the kinds of strategies that I was talking about in relation to fiction will generally work better for memoir than the nonfiction. So hopefully, those have made sense to you, Judith. But if you have a follow-on question, then pop it in and I'll get down to it in a minute. I'm kind of going down through them in the order in which people dropped them in. So what do I mean by aesthetic for poetry? So what I mean by aesthetic for poetry is that the type of poetry that people want to read is very much guided by the language, and the language around it creates an aesthetic that is recognizable to other people. So that's what I was trying to get at when I was talking about if you're doing music or visual arts with somebody, that makes it easier for the reader to understand roughly where you kind of fall with if they haven't read any of your poetry. But also it's important for you to understand what sort of, so aesthetics and mood, language are all very closely linked when it comes to poetry. So what feeling are you trying to evoke in the reader, and then how does your language evoke that, and then what else evokes that in terms of images, visual images, film, moodiness, all of those things. So it's very nebulous when you're talking about this, very hard to give clear and clean-cut answers. But getting a sense, it's about stepping outside your poetry, which can be terribly personal and quite difficult to do. But stepping outside it and looking at it with cold and kind of clinical eye, and maybe asking other people, what do they think the aesthetic, the feeling, the mood of this kind of work is, if you find that you can't do that for yourself. So let me know, Sonia, if that makes sense. What is a good sales number for a poetry collection? Anna asks. Well, poetry is exactly, a good sales number is a number that makes you happy. I think that's the only thing we can say about that. Poetry is like everything else. There are poets on selling direct and making millions, and that kind of poetry tends to be quite popular, very accessible, often in the love arena. But and so they sell millions. Another poet might be really happy to be selling in the low hundreds, or even even perhaps happy to sell it all. So a good sales number is a number that makes the publisher happy. So it's good to have a target, not just for poetry indeed, but for whatever book you're selling. What is your current target? When you meet that target, then you can raise it. So I hope that's, I know again it's kind of a how long is a piece of string answer, but I really do truly feel that. Could you expand a little on building marketing for the tropes in your subgenre, please? So first of all, understand what tropes are. Secondly, what are the common tropes in your subgenre? when you have a sense of that, then you bring your knowledge around that into your book descriptions, into any chats that you're doing on your live video, or whatever your marketing then is, your email newsletter, and whatever, your blog, podcast, whatever it might be, an interview when somebody else is interviewing you. You are conscious that these tropes work, readers love them, and so you make sure that you highlight that they exist in your work. And that is kind of the main thing when it comes to marketing. Marketing is the setting up of your actual materials, your book, your bio, and all of that to meet your target readers. Then when it comes to promotion, you can actually use those tropes as well in your categories and keywords if you're doing ads, for example. So the main thing, though, is to understand them and to connect with them. So, you know, people talk about, oh, that's such a cliched idea, but a cliche is, a trope is another word for cliche, and understanding the tropes that always will turn up in your sub-genre is really important. You know, they will have been there 50 years ago, they'll be there 50 years hence. They're evergreen, they're always there, and they're what readers respond to. So it's a subtle form of marketing, but it can be really effective when you get it right. Okay, any more questions? Just going through. Nonfiction portrait memoir about my late father's experience of long-term stay in an isolation hospital. I know already it is attracting different audiences. How do I settle on a back of book blurb to appeal across audiences? Helen, I would say the best thing is not to try to do that, because there's a real danger of falling between the stools. I would go back to what I was saying there in the presentation about creating your ideal reader avatar. What is the core reader you want? And then you will find that the book hits in the center. Other people can still pick it up if they are interested. But if you start trying to appeal to everybody, there's a real danger that you'll end up with nobody. So go for the center, and then over time, it won't be so much about your back of book blurb, but it will be more about things that you can change and alter. You can begin to reach out to different groups and hit them with the ancillary marketing, which isn't directly the book description itself. But for book description, go core. Okay, so we are seeing that people are interested in the groups, which is interesting and great. Thank you. Question: what are the best channels to market Transylvanian vampire seeks revenge but finds something else? Gothic, dark wave, music infused. Sounds amazing, Stephen. Yeah, appealing to lovers of the music genre and people in the medical profession. Well, you know, I think in terms of your description there, I think you're looking for the kind of reader who is looking for something slightly different. And so in terms of your book description and your core marketing, I will be playing up that idea that there's a lot going on here in the music and everything else, and that it's something different, it's something new, it's something fresh, and so on. And the teaser there is also very good. In terms of then going on to market to the music genre people and people in the medical profession, I think at that point you begin to divide your marketing, and you know, you're not going to, in other words, you're not going to come up with a way of describing or a particular channel that's going to reach both of these at the same time. So in terms of when you're asking about channels, perhaps you could elaborate and say, are you talking about social media? What do you mean specifically when you say channel? I'm launching historical fiction imminently. Do ALLi still recommend WordPress book vault for paper fulfillment sales? Yes, yes, yeah, that hasn't changed. What about ebooks? So broadly speaking, this is more a distribution question than a marketing question, but I'm happy to take it because obviously your distribution needs to be in place and be good before you get going. So what we recommend, you start with print, so I'll start there, though I think always when we're marketing we should start with ebooks because it's much easier to change things on ebooks. It's much easier to test things on ebooks and then settle things into print after you've understood and settled down, because especially with early books, first books, second books, there's a massive amount of learning to be done, and you have your idea about what works, but your readers may well have completely different ideas. And so the feedback you get, and from other authors as well, can really change how you're approaching and going at things. And so I think it's begin with ebooks, but I'll answer your question in the order in which you asked it. So for print, we recommend that you publish Amazon, KDP Print for the Amazon ecosystem, Ingram Spark for the bookstore system, and WordPress and Book Vault or Shopify and Book Vault works very well for paper fulfillment from sales on your website. Ingram is now covering that also. So print, those three suppliers cover everything. For those who are not interested in selling direct, please do though upload to both Amazon and Ingram, because they do very different things for an indie, and having them both in place maximizes your opportunities for sure. And it's not hard to do, so definitely well worth doing. And then for ebooks, KDP for the Amazon system, we recommend going wide, and so you can go individually if you wish to platforms that are important to you. So Kobo, Apple, Google Books, various platforms like that if you wish, Barnes and Noble depending on where you're located and so on. But most people use an aggregator, do Amazon directly, maybe one or two others, and an aggregator for the rest. The three aggregators that we recommend are Draft to Digital, Publish Drive, and StreetLib. And you can do one or indeed all of those, and it's not huge to set up there, and it means that your books are then distributed in almost every possible ebook outlet. I stress though, that's distribution. That's not going to actually sell your books. What sells your books is the kind of things we've been talking and thinking about here tonight. Understanding the reader journey, making sure you reach the reader in some way, making efforts to get information about you and your book out there through various methods, whatever feels good for you. Catherine, I've written a book that offers a fresh perspective for writers. I like the idea of offering video content after purchase. Was that what you were implying? Yes, you can do it that way, exactly. Excuse me. You can also do it the other way around, whereby you have some video samples even in advance. So if you're going to use video for your education, you can also use it for your marketing. A good website provider for your website. I'm a believer in WordPress. Lots of other authors use Squarespace. There are lots of them that are good. Excuse me. I've just got a tickle in my throat now and no glass of water nearby. Carolyn is recommending Wix. It really depends on what you are looking for. What I will recommend is don't go for one of these website providers that charges you a monthly subscription. Get whatever you're doing in place, and you will still need to probably, either put time or money into keeping it up, keeping it up to date, and just keeping it in the right place, and adding on to some bells and whistles as your marketing expands. So keep the budget for that. And finally, any advice on corporate sales outreach? The best way of corporate sales is speaking. So getting yourself onto a speaking forum, an agency that will help you to that deals with your genre or sub-genre, even better. Getting a speaking agent to line up speaking events for you, that can be quite easy once you have a book, and particularly if you can demonstrate sales on your book. Speaking agents smile on that. And yeah, I think for corporate, that's the best. You can, of course, do your own outreach, but they tend to work with the bigger the corporation, the more budget they have, the more likely they are to work with an agent on that. Okay, folks, so that is, as I said, an overview of the, Stephen came back, by channels and then to methods and our platforms routes to reaching the likely readers. So the thing, Stephen, the channels take you everywhere, and the marketing takes you to the readers who are interested in it. So don't confuse distribution, which is the channels and platform that you use, and get your book out there to the reader, with the actual act of promoting the book to the reader, marketing the book to the reader, which is a different process of publishing. If you're unclear about any of those, you have a free ALLi guide, Creative Self-Publishing, which I did, which breaks down the processes and the different aspects of each and kind of does a step-by-step. So that might be useful. So thank you all for being here. I hope it was useful. I see that some of you are interested in the genre group, so that is something that we'll start to look into. And thank you all for being here, being so attentive, and helping each other. It's really great to have you as part of ALLi. Until next time, happy writing and happy publishing. Bye-bye.